Peace be with you, friends. Welcome to this Supernatural Monday as we dive into one of the most powerful declarations Jesus ever made. Ephphatha, be opened. This isn't just ancient history we're reading about today. This is a supernatural reality that's available to you right now, in this very moment, and I believe God is going to do something extraordinary in your life as we explore this together. You know, when Jesus spoke that Aramaic word Ephphatha to the deaf and mute man in Mark chapter 7, he wasn't just performing a miracle for one individual. He was demonstrating a spiritual principle that would echo through the ages, a divine key that unlocks supernatural breakthrough in every generation. The heavens are open over you today, and Christ is still speaking that same word of liberation into every area of your life that feels closed, blocked, or restricted. Let's understand what was really happening in this extraordinary encounter. This man had two interconnected problems. He couldn't hear and he couldn't speak clearly. But here's what's absolutely fascinating about the spiritual symbolism embedded in this miracle. When you can't hear God's voice, you can't speak His words with clarity and authority. The two are inextricably connected. Reception comes before proclamation. Listening precedes speaking with power. And friends, this is precisely where so many of us find ourselves today in our spiritual journey. We live in a world of constant, overwhelming noise, don't we? Social media notifications buzzing every few minutes, news alerts screaming for our attention, the endless chatter of opinions and voices competing for our mental and spiritual bandwidth. We're drowning in sound, but starving for the authentic voice of God. We've become spiritually deaf, not because God isn't speaking, He never stops speaking, but because we've lost the ability to tune into His specific frequency. We're like radios, stuck between stations, hearing only static and interference when we should be receiving His crystal-clear transmission of love, guidance, and supernatural direction. But notice carefully what Jesus did before He spoke that life-changing word. He took the man aside, away from the crowd, away from the noise and distraction. He put His fingers in the man's ears and touched his tongue with His own saliva. This wasn't just a physical action. It was a profound prophetic demonstration. Jesus was showing us that breakthrough requires intimate encounter with the divine. The miraculous happens when we step away from the noise of the crowd, away from the opinions of others, away from the constant bombardment of worldly voices, and allow Christ to touch the very areas where we've experienced blockage, limitation, and spiritual restriction. Think about this for a moment and let it sink deep into your spirit. What areas of your life feel completely closed right now? Where do you sense blockage, restriction, or seemingly insurmountable limitation? Perhaps it's in your ability to hear God's direction clearly for major decisions you're facing. Maybe it's in your relationships where communication has broken down and walls have been built. Perhaps it's in your finances where every door seems to slam shut just as opportunity appears. Maybe it's in your physical health, where doctors have given you reports that seem final and unchangeable. Or perhaps it's in your calling and purpose, where you feel like you're speaking into a void, your voice muted and your message unclear. The enemy of your soul wants you to believe that these closed doors are permanent fixtures in your life, that the limitations you're experiencing are just the way things are and will always be. He whispers lies that you should accept mediocrity, settle for less than God's best, and resign yourself to spiritual deafness and muted expression. But Jesus is declaring something radically different over your life today. He's saying that what appears closed to human effort is about to be supernaturally opened by divine intervention. When Christ looked up to heaven before speaking that powerful word, He was demonstrating something crucial that we must understand. He was showing us that the solution to earthly blockages comes from heavenly intervention. He was accessing the open heaven, drawing down supernatural power to break through natural limitations and human impossibilities. And friends, that same open heaven that Jesus accessed 2,000 years ago is available to you today. The veil in the temple has been torn from top to bottom, the way has been made accessible, and heaven's unlimited resources are available to every believer who will position themselves to receive what God is releasing. But here's what I really want you to understand about this miracle. It wasn't just about physical healing, as wonderful as that was. When Jesus said, "Ephphatha," he was releasing a spiritual key that unlocks divine potential in every area of human limitation. The man's ears were open to hear sounds, voices, and music he'd never experienced before. His tongue was loosed to speak with clarity, power, and articulation that had been impossible for him. This is a perfect picture of what happens when heaven invades your limitations and supernatural power breaks through natural restrictions. You see, many of us have been living far beneath our spiritual capacity for far too long. We've accepted closed doors as normal, blocked communication as standard operating procedure, and limited expression as just the way we are wired. We've gotten comfortable with spiritual mediocrity when God has called us to supernatural excellence. But Jesus is declaring over your life today that Supernatural Monday means supernatural breakthrough is not just possible. It's God's will for you. The heavens that seemed closed and distant are now open and accessible. The channels of communication that were blocked by disappointment, hurt, or confusion are now flowing freely. The voice that was muted by fear, insecurity, or past failures is now ready to speak with divine authority and supernatural power. I want you to use your imagination for a moment and picture what it would be like if every spiritual ear in your life was suddenly opened wide. What if you could hear God's voice with perfect clarity, like having a direct phone line to heaven? What if His instructions came through like high-definition audio? His encouragement like surround sound that fills every corner of your being. His warnings like crystal-clear alerts that protect you from danger. What if the confusion that has clouded your decision-making suddenly lifted like morning fog? The mixed signals stopped interfering with your reception, and you could tune into heaven's frequency with pinpoint precision. And what if, at the same time, every area where your voice has been restricted, diminished, or silenced suddenly broke open with supernatural power? What if you could speak life over dead situations with the authority of heaven backing your words? What if your prayers stopped being religious exercises and became supernatural transactions that moved the heart of God? What if your declarations aligned perfectly with heaven's will and shifted atmospheres wherever you went? What if your testimony flowed with such power and authenticity that it transformed everyone who heard it, breaking chains in their lives just by the weight of your words? This is exactly what Ephphatha releases in your life. This is what happens when Jesus speaks breakthrough over the areas where you've experienced limitation, blockage, and spiritual restriction. But here's the key principle you must understand. Sadhuru, just like that man in the gospel, you have to come close enough for Jesus to touch those specific areas that need opening. You can't receive a breakthrough for your spiritual hearing while keeping your ears covered with the noise of the world. You can't experience freedom in your speech while refusing to open your mouth and step out in faith. The heavens are open over you today, but you must intentionally position yourself to receive what's being released from the throne room of God. This means making the deliberate choice to come away from the crowd of competing voices that demand your attention. This means allowing Jesus intimate access to the very areas where you've experienced the most limitation, disappointment, and pain. This means trusting Him enough to touch the sensitive places where you've been wounded, disappointed, or blocked from moving forward. Some of you listening today have been praying for breakthrough for months, maybe even years. You've been asking God to open doors that seem permanently sealed, to clear the way where obstacles appear immovable. to remove barriers that have stood like giants in your path. You've cried out for change, for progress, for something to shift in your favor. But today, Jesus wants to go deeper than just removing external barriers and obstacles. He wants to open your spiritual capacity to perceive and participate in what He's already making available in the supernatural realm. When heaven is truly open over your life, opportunities that were completely invisible to your natural eye become clearly visible to your spiritual perception. Resources that seemed inaccessible suddenly become available through divine connections and supernatural favor. Relationships that appeared impossible begin to develop naturally as God brings the right people across your path. Callings and purposes that seemed beyond your reach become your next assignment as God prepares you and opens the way simultaneously. But it all begins with Ephphatha, with allowing Jesus to open what's been closed in your spiritual senses, with surrendering the areas of limitation to His supernatural touch, with believing that what seems permanent to man is temporary to God. Let me tell you what happens when your spiritual ears are truly opened by the Master's touch. You start hearing God's voice in places you never noticed before. You begin receiving His guidance through circumstances, through other people, through His word in ways that pierce right to your specific situation with laser precision. The noise of the world becomes background static, while God's voice becomes the dominant frequency in your life. You develop spiritual discernment that protects you from deception and guides you into truth. You hear opportunities before others. You sense danger before it manifests and receive downloads of wisdom that position you for success. And when your spiritual voice is loosed by divine intervention, something powerful shifts in the atmosphere around you. Your prayers stop being religious exercises filled with empty words and become supernatural transactions that move heaven and earth. Your words carry weight because they're aligned with heaven's intent and backed by divine authority. Your declarations create measurable shifts in circumstances because they're rooted in faith and confirmed by God's power. Your testimony becomes a weapon that destroys the enemy's lies in other people's lives and opens their hearts to receive truth. But here's what I need you to understand with absolute clarity. This breakthrough isn't automatic. The heavens may be open over you, but you must actively engage with what's being made available. Just like that man had to respond when Jesus touched him, just like he had to open his mouth and attempt to speak, you must respond when Christ extends His hand toward the areas of your life that need supernatural opening. This means positioning yourself in His presence regularly, not just when you need something or when crisis demands your attention. This means creating space in your schedule for quiet communion, for listening prayer, for intimate fellowship with the Holy Spirit. This means quieting the noise long enough to actually hear what He's saying, turning off the distractions that compete for your spiritual attention. This means being willing to speak what He gives you to say, even when it feels uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or contrary to your natural inclinations. This means stepping into the supernatural with expectation rather than settling for the natural with resignation. Friends, we're living in times when the world desperately needs people who can hear heaven clearly and speak with divine authority. We need believers whose spiritual senses are sharp and well-developed, whose connection to God is strong and consistent, whose voices carry supernatural power that can shift atmospheres and change lives. We need people who live with open heavens rather than closed systems, who operate from abundance rather than limitation, who speak life rather than death into every situation they encounter. The church needs voices that have been touched by the Master's hand, ears that have been opened by divine intervention, tongues that have been loosed by supernatural power. The marketplace needs believers who can hear God's strategies for business and finance, who can speak His solutions to complex problems. Families need parents and spouses who can hear heaven's wisdom for relationships and speak God's love into broken hearts. Communities need citizens who can discern the times and seasons, who can speak prophetically into cultural situations with accuracy and authority. So I'm declaring over you today with the authority of God's word, Ephphatha, be opened. Let every spiritual ear be unstopped by the finger of God. Let every blocked channel of communication be cleared by divine power. Let every restricted voice be loosed by supernatural intervention. Let the heavens that have seemed closed over your situation break open with divine possibility and unlimited potential. Let Supernatural Monday become your new normal as you learn to live with consistent access to heaven's resources and supernatural breakthrough. The same Jesus who touched that man's ears and tongue 2,000 years ago is reaching toward you right now in this very moment. His hands are extended toward every area of limitation in your life. Don't miss this divine appointment. Don't settle for spiritual limitation when spiritual breakthrough is being offered freely. Don't accept the status quo when supernatural change is available. The heavens are open over you, and Christ is speaking Ephphatha over every area of your life that needs divine intervention. Receive it by faith, believe it with your whole heart, walk in it with confidence. Position yourself for breakthrough. Open your spiritual ears to hear what the Spirit is saying. Open your mouth to speak what heaven is releasing. And watch as God transforms your limitations into launching pads for His supernatural power. Your blockages into breakthroughs, your closed doors into open heavens. And God bless you.